the U.S. Postal Service has been struggling financially for many, many years. This is sort of a perennial problem that, they bleed money all the time. And they're scrambling, asking Congress for billions of dollars on an annual basis. That part is not new. What's new this year is, President Trump, of course, has no love for the mail-in ballot system. He has been attacking that system for a long time, warning of voter fraud and all the problems that will happen, he says, if millions of people use that system this year. And then he has appointed, as the head of the USPS, he has appointed a very wealthy and consistently Republican donor to the Trump administration and to the GOP over many years. And he is doing all of these structural changes. He doesn't have any background in government. He has background in the private sector, which is unusual for the post office, for one thing. So he's raising a lot of eyebrows, both because of his background and because of these operational changes that he's making heading into the elections. And he's doing this in the name of balancing the books, of cutting the budget in order to allow the post office to not operate in the red as it has in the past. But to do so, he's cutting overtime, he's cutting deliveries, he's cutting the hours that people are working, and that is, the critics say, going to affect the delivery of the mail. The Democrats have asked for $25 billion to prop up the post office. They put that in their HEROES Act, which they passed in May. That was Nancy Pelosi and the House Democrats' fifth emergency relief bill, and Mitch McConnell, the Senate Republicans, have not taken that up. They came back with a much smaller package that did not have any money for the post office. But in subsequent negotiations with some of the White House officials, with Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, Mark Meadows, the White House Chief of Staff, the Republicans are now offering about $10 billion. And what you saw yesterday, Mark Meadows went on CNN's State of the Union program, told Jake Tapper, we've offered $10 billion, but Pelosi doesn't want to do it piecemeal. She wants it as part of a much larger package that we don't accept.
It has been 2 months since President Trump installed a loyal supporter as Postmaster General. This is somebody who's been pushing various measures that have caused serious mail delays in parts of the country. And now the Postal Service is warning states about vote-by-mail delays in November. This all comes as the president is escalating attacks on voting by mail.
But listen, if my Democrat friends are all upset about this, come back to Washington, D.C., where the president and I am right now. Why don't they come back? Let's go ahead and get a stimulus check out to Americans. Let's make sure that small businesses are protected with an extended PPP program, and put the postal funding in there. We'll pass it tomorrow. The president will sign it, and this will all go away, because what we're seeing is Democrats are trying to use this to their political advantage, Jake.
So Pelosi called his bluff, and a couple hours later said, all right, we're coming back. And so right now we're waiting to see when they are going to come back. They haven't announced a specific calendar date, but we think that the vote on a Democratic bill that would actually, it doesn't provide specific new funding to the post office. It prevents the post office from putting into place these new operational changes until after the election. So all the cutting of hours and things like that would not be allowed to go into effect until next year. So they'll vote on that, we think, as soon as Saturday. And then it'll be up to Mitch McConnell and to see if he brings back the Senate as well to work on this. So it's all happening very quickly. It happened very quickly over the weekend, a lot of moving parts, and we'll just have to see how Congress responds and if President Trump will sign these things into law.
I think it's important when you're talking about the U.S. Postal Service to pull apart sort of how people view the actual postal service versus sort of the more political stuff going on right now that President Trump is driving, particularly around the idea of mail-in voting. The Postal Service as a service is, broadly speaking, popular and widely used, and it's sort of one of those institutions that Americans view as part of the fabric of society. It also is the source of hundreds of thousands of jobs across the country in virtually every community. In fact, it's one of the few things that is literally present in every community of the country. So when you sort of take those two aspects together, it is very popular. And the idea of sort of providing funding, coronavirus funding for it, is popular. We see in this Hill-HarrisX poll, 78% of the public support giving money to the Postal Service as coronavirus support. And that really matches what we see in a lot of other data where the public is very much in favor of the idea of the government providing extra funding to help us get through this crisis.
One of the things that's interesting about the United States Postal Service issue is that unlike all other issues, literally any other issue that might lead to bipartisan support, it hasn't happened. But with USPS, this is a time in which we see that it actually is the case. Well over 75% of Americans are like, yes, COVID relief should include funding for USPS. And the reason why is because people primarily use USPS to get their mail, particularly low-income people who live in rural areas, people who live in densely populated places. While some of us might live in major cities and we have access to Amazon and UPS and FedEx who can deliver our mail quickly. I mean, even some places where they're flying drones and many helicopters to deliver mail and people can order something in the morning and it's there by noon. That doesn't happen for most Americans. Most Americans rely on the United States Postal Service. Most Americans also recognize that USPS is a staple that is built into the Constitution about what is due us to get mail delivered in a timely fashion, for us to be able to communicate with people. And people see that a lack of funding for USPS, people see mailboxes being removed from public places as an encroachment on their constitutional rights, but also to their way of life during a time in which we're in a pandemic, where people are relying on mail being sent to them because they can't come out in ways that they're comfortable with.
To make the point, the president is very directly tying how states decide, and it's up to the states to decide how they cast their ballots, with funding for the Postal Service. I want you to listen to what the president said just this week that alarmed so many people, Democrats and Republicans alike.
They want $25 billion for the post office. Now, they need that money in order to have the post office work so it can take all of these millions and millions of ballots. But if they don't get those two items, that means you can't have universal mail-in voting because they're not equipped to have it.